Dan Perry is an Israeli affairs analyst and the former regional editor of the Associated Press in the Middle East. He's joining us from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. This started out as a conflict, according to Benjamin Netanyahu, directed towards Iran's nuclear program. It seems to have expanded into threats of regime change within Iran. What do you think are the wider geopolitical implications of this conflict, almost irrespective of how it eventually ends?
I think a weakened Iran could be a situation that might catalyze a series of events that would lead to a major regional strategic realignment. I disagree with Erdogan that Israel seeks to widen the conflict. I think Israel seeks to get rid of the nuclear threat that they perceive and that I believe the IAEA basically confirms, but they've made no secret that they'd like the Iranian regime to fall. That's an extraordinary thing for a third party to ask for, but I think that is a wish that is shared by much of the world, including almost certainly the majority of the Iranian people. Should that happen, that would involve such a moment of opportunity with the Iranian threat to the entire Arab world and to the Sunni powers in the region removed. One could envision many things, including an end game in Gaza, Israel being more flexible about that, including a sense in the Arab world that the time has come for a complete and total paradigm shift. And I could see a moderate Israeli government emerging from the elections that have to be held next year. I could see normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia and the remaining countries of the Gulf, perhaps Kuwait. I could envision the new government in Lebanon really moving against Hezbollah, having been shorn of its Iranian patron, and the new government in Syria that clearly is desperate for international legitimacy and has more than hinted they'd be willing as well to consider normalization with Israel. So an Israel that faces that level of potential acceptance in the region after almost 80 years of yearning for it, I sense, and I think I know, would be much more forthcoming towards the region, including towards the Palestinians. There is a real chance that with the major threat perceived by Israel by Israelis to their existence removed, should that happen, either by a severe weakening of the regime in Iran or a collapse of the regime in Iran, with that removed, we could be looking at, well, to paraphrase Shimon Peres, a new Middle East.
There's been a lot of suggestion that Iran's nuclear program has not been leading or is not presenting as immediate a threat as Benjamin Netanyahu has been claiming as the pretext for the attacks that we have seen. What is it, do you think, that the Israeli government fears more, the threat of a nuclear weapon from Iran or the regime of Iran? And therefore, which do you think is being targeted in this conflict?
I think they fear both. In the short term, of course, the nuclear program has them very agitated, and Iran's efforts in that direction for 30 years have been a major focus of even moderate Israeli leaders like Yitzhak Rabin and others. But look, they fear the regime in ways that go beyond the nuclear issue, and I'm talking about basically the Iranian project to fill the region with proxy militias, the so-called ring of fire around Israel, from Hezbollah in Lebanon to the Houthis in the south, Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas in the middle, even the Shiite militias in Iraq that are answerable to and partly funded by Iran were firing at Israel during the past year and a half or so. And obviously Iran is also trying to destabilize Jordan with Islamist activity there, and that would be a major, major threat to Israel that has a huge border with Jordan. If all of this were removed, if the Islamic Republic's project against Israel via these proxy militias were removed, that would be a whole new reality for Israel that would change the risk equation completely. So to answer your question, I think they basically fear the regime. And that becomes part of the equation here, because if Donald Trump stalls in Hamlet-like fashion while he wonders what to do and deals with the competing views of this and the two wings of his MAGA movement, the isolationists versus the interventionists, Israel has another couple of weeks, perhaps, and it may be that they may move to trying to degrade symbols of the regime in order to compel, maybe not right now, because no one expects regime change while Iran is being attacked, but to compel a future uprising in Iran that maybe a weakened regime will not be able to suppress in as murderous a fashion as they have in the past. And my own guess, my own assessment would be that the likely scenario would be a palace coup in Iran by the security establishment, essentially, having concluded that the Islamic Republic is no longer the most effective tool to maintain their economic privileges.
Let me just posit a scenario too, that let's say that Israel carries on its attacks in the level that it is at the moment. Then the US carries out, steps in, carries out the bunker busting bomb attack on some of the major nuclear sites. Does that, in your opinion, draw a line under it for Israel? Or by what you're saying, the suggestion would be that may not be enough to ensure what Israel would perceive as a regime, the grounds for regime change in Iran. And it does rather imply that Israel would then simply continue the attacks until it got to a point where it thought it had achieved what it set out to achieve.
I think much depends on the American position here. And there is a lack of appetite in the U.S., to say the least, for a prolonged engagement in Iran. And I think there's also understanding in the U.S. as well as in Israel that regime change is not likely, as I say, during the actual attack, nor would a continued attack be defensible I think, in the view of much of the world, which currently does support Israel. Certainly Europe does, and I suspect the Arabs do as well. If the nuclear program is manifestly decapitated. So essentially, if the U.S. moves fairly quickly to take out the Fordo facility, I think that creates a clear inflection point where there will be great pressure on the U.S. and Israel to take the win, to declare victory, to call it a day, and then to demand of the regime, or what remains of it, certain terms. But I think the war would end and there would be a negotiation. That negotiation would involve things like Iran disavowing any further effort to meddle in its Arab neighbors.
Dan Perry, it's really interesting to get your thoughts on this, and we appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed.